And that's what really transpired when it came to the physical altercation part of it. The scratches on her neck, he attributed to her having eczema, and that scratch was already there before the altercation.
Right. Well, it's
took
crazy
place.
that even having to explain yourself.
That's
That's
right.
what, to
That's
me,
what I
thought,
mean about the fishbowl.
Yeah, it just, to me, I just felt like, wow, that's his household. You know, his child, he's providing for this child who probably has never wanted for anything in her whole life.
Right.
You know, very privileged life. And, you know, because she wants to not to follow what's going on in their house and how he, you know, following the Lord. And, you know, to call the police is just crazy to me. And then for him to have to explain. So it just makes you feel like, well, wow, you know, I can't discipline my children because, and, you know, and for other kids watching, well, I could do that for my parent too. You know, so it's crazy. So we really have to pray.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that would be the last thing that I would say. More than anything, it is a call to prayer for the body of Christ, because of the fact that there's so many souls that have been added to the kingdom as a result of the tremendous work that has been done by Creflo Dollar Ministries. And I think that anytime one of us gets attacked, whether it be through an altercation in our home or our personal lives, that's just another reminder that, you know, the enemy is oftentimes attacking works that are being done to glorify God. And so, you know, we have to be careful not to be quick to jump to an opinion.
Because it could have been us. Because
absolutely.
You know, it could have been. That's what I always think about. This could have been me. I mean, I could have been disciplining my child and someone called up on me. And mind you, you know, I'm not international, you know, internationally known as well as, I put that, I had to throw that in, as well as Pastor Dollar. But, you know, but that could have been me. That could have been my mugshot. I was telling my dad the other night, again, shout out to Dad, but we were talking about, you know, how easy it is for someone to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. And, you know, and because you're with that person and they get in trouble, you know, your mugshot is on TV as well. That's it. And then you have to go back and explain yourself. And so, like I said, that could be any of us. So we really have to be careful about rushing to judgment, because that's the first thing I think about is that could have been me. Right. I mean, I remember, you know, growing up, I mean, there was very little time after you reached a certain point, let me put it that way. My mom and dad believed that, you know, once they believed that you had been explained and you had the opportunity to understand, after that, you know, then came, you know, that discipline, you know, and so, you know, we grew up knowing that, you know, after we reached that threshold, my mother would raise her eyebrows and give us this look, and we knew that after that, you know, it could be subject to, you know, some consequences that we didn't want to suffer. That's right. So I think you're right in terms of, you know, those of us who are a little bit older remember that these things transpired, and we didn't dare think to pick up the phone and call the police. We just considered it a part of, you know, our being reprimanded for something that we did. And again, there's two sides to every story. That's right. Something transpired. Exactly. And we have to be careful too as ministers. I think so much pressure is on ministers today across the board. They have pressure from their church, they have pressure from the public, they have pressure in their home, in their marriages. And, you know, sometimes it is a boiling, you know, you boil and, you know, that kid comes along at the wrong time and, you know, and people snap, and that does happen. So I think we even have to be careful as ministers to know when's the time for us to walk away, because it's very easy to grab one of those little kids' necks. It is very easy to snatch someone up, and because you can't snatch up your church members, you can't snatch up, you know, your assistants, and so sometimes that wife and those children are the easiest thing for them to go off on, because they can't go off anywhere else. So I think it's even important as ministers that they need to be careful as well, to know that, you know, I need help. I need a break. I need to walk away. I need to get counseling, because sometimes, you know, we need counseling as ministers. You know, we can't, you know, think that we can save the world and not take care of ourselves. So I think we have to take care of ourselves. And when we see the pressure building up, to know, okay, this is my time that I need to just go walk away. I need to go just read or, you know, go listen to music or something to take a walk. Exactly. That's so true.
Right. So.
Well, you know what? It's really interesting. I know we can talk about that all day. But you know what? Again, that actually goes toward our topic of what we're talking about today, keeping the faith in tough times. And again, this is a tough time for him. You know, he's thinking about, wow, you know, him and his wife, we're trying to save the world, and we're doing ministry all over the world, and we're saving souls, different, you know, we're really working hard, and then all of a sudden this comes up. You know, the bottom falls out. You have people who have probably even left his church already because they've jumped to, you know, that conclusion or whatever. And so that it is on the other side. And so how do you keep the faith in those tough times? I mean, you know, we know that God is always there. And although, you know, he probably feels like, well, you know, God, where are you right now? You know, how do you keep the faith in those tough times?
Well, I think you have to go back to, I call it home base, you know, go back to the place where you know. And that place for someone who's a born again believer, you know, is their faith and their confidence in God. In the fact that they have to have an assurance from within that even though I don't understand the dynamics of what's going on in my life right now, whether it's a situation like what we're discussing now, whether it's a layoff, a foreclosure, a threat of repossession of your car, or a family scenario that has fallen apart, or whatever it may be, you have to know that God promises, first of all, never to leave us nor forsake us. And it's out of that knowledge that you begin to recognize, okay, if he's with me, and I know that he is, then this is the moment when I have to tap into the resource that he makes available to me to say, okay, God, now what do I do? Okay, Father, I realize that this has gone into this direction, or I've gotten this letter in the mail, or I've even gotten this diagnosis from the doctor. Now, God, what do I do? And the assurance of knowing that he loves you, that he promises never to leave you, that in the midst of whatever it is that you're going through, that he's right there. And that comes out of relationship. You know, I always tell people that when you're in the midst of a storm, that's not a good time to get acquainted with him. You know, it's great when you have an established relationship with him, so that when you encounter a storm, and we're all in the midst of or coming out of a storm. So when you encounter a storm, then it's a familiar relationship that you can go to and connect with him and draw down the wisdom and the knowledge and the love even that he has for us. But when you're not acquainted with him and you're out there in the middle of a storm, and for the first time now you've got to talk to the one who has everything in control, you know, that's a challenge. It doesn't mean that it can't be worked out, doesn't mean that he's not waiting to hear from you. It just means that I'm saying it's much better if you already have a relationship with him. So don't wait until the tough times come to get to know him. Get to know him now, so that, you know, when the tough times come, you know, you're not trying to find your way in prayer.
Exactly.
You know. And
you know what, even to add to that, Juliette, you know, I think sometimes we, I guess, you know, Christianize it, if that's a word. I may be made up a word right now. But sometimes, you know, we have to remember that God knows that we are, you know,
wherever we are.
Exactly. And he knows that, you know, sometimes that, you know, where are you, God? You know, a lot of us haven't got to that point. And even a lot of people who are watching today, you may not have gotten to that point to where, you know that no matter what, God is still on your side. And so you may be going through something right now. You may be dealing with some family issues. Again, we talked about health issues. You may be dealing with issues with your children, issues in your marriage. And you may have said, you know, God, I don't know you like I maybe need to know you. And so you may not have that strong foundation to go back on. So what would you say to even that person who is maybe a new Christian, or a person who doesn't have strong faith? They haven't developed that relationship to know that God is always there, and then no matter what, he's in the mix of it. What would you say to that person?
Well, one thing that I would share is that even when you do have that strong foundation, and you know that God is your source, you still have to almost like get a GPS back to where you are right now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because the situations in your life sometimes can really, you know, flip you over, turn you around to the point where you got to, okay, God, now what's going on?
Right.
So I do want to say that, because I don't want to make it seem like, you know, it's something quick or instant when you have a relationship with the Lord. It is better when you have a relationship with the Lord, no question about that. But for those who don't have that relationship, I would say to you, it's a great time to develop it, because my experience has been that God is waiting on us anyway to establish that relationship. And even as I was thinking about this topic earlier today, the Lord spoke something to my spirit, and that was this: there is a knowing that comes when you are in the midst of a storm. There is a level of intimacy that you have the ability to gain with God that you don't have at any other time.
That's true.
And I have been through, you know, financial crisis. My testimony, 20 years ago, lost my first husband. Just a number of things that you experience in this life. Life happens to you. And in the midst of that, I can tell you that having a relationship with God throughout that, but then there was another level, a deeper level of that relationship that came only out of that furnace of affliction, only out of that time of testing, only out of the experience when my husband got laid off and I had lost my job. And we were believing God, for the mortgage to our home,
right.
And the car note and the other things. It's in times like that that you learn who God is. And I wish I could say it could come in another way. I wish I could say you could read a book and get it, but that's not the way. No, an iPod, download, but it's just not that way. He is the kind of God that I think loves to prove himself in times of adversity. I mean, I think that, the Bible bears witness to that there are so many instances where the person was going through so many difficulties, back up against the wall, and God came through, and their relationship with God and their faith in God was on another level as a result of that experience. And that's why I think sometimes we go through what we go through. It's because there's a development, there's a process that is underway. Right. And as a result of that process, God is taking you to a place where he wants you to be.
That's right. And it's even, it's not funny, but it is kind of funny that once you've gone through that tough time, doesn't it feel like, wow, that wasn't so bad?
Right. But when you were in it, though.
But when you were in it doesn't feel like that.
It was what caused you to lose sleep at night, what caused you to lose your appetite. You spent your time wondering, how is this going to turn out, God? But then once you come out of it, you go, wow.
It wasn't bad. I can handle anything now. And even someone today who may be watching who's in a relationship, and the relationship may be, someone left them, someone walked off and left them, and their heart is broken. Right. And what am I going to do without this person, whether it's a female or a male? And, you're feeling like, God, I thought this was the one for me.
Right.
But that's the issue. You thought it. He didn't think it. So, again, in a tough time, keeping that faith. And I have found just even in relationships and talking with so many different people that once they kept the faith and they said, okay, God, I'm going to trust you, their real soulmate was just waiting for that other one to leave in the first place.
Right.
And so even as someone who's lost their job, for another example, that you've lost your job and you're upset about losing that job, but there's another job that's waiting that God is trying to bless you with, so keeping often. That faith.
Oh, yeah. And that happens so often.
It's so important.
Most of the people, in fact, there are statistics that bear this out, that the entrepreneurs actually increase during a time of recession, because that's when people stop trying to seek out employment outside and they start looking from within to say, what is it that I have that I can use to be a stream of income in my home? And then they discover this was here all along, but it was the nature of the circumstances that drove me to begin to discover what was in me all along and what was the plan of God for me all along. The business that I birthed during that season of adversity was the business that was in me all along that I would have never discovered had I not been laid off from that job, had I not had difficulty finding employment, I would have never stopped long enough to look inward and find out what was in me all along.
Yeah, and even for our young people who are watching today, who may be watching with their parents, and for our parents who want to actually give a piece of advice to their kids, that even goes for them. It's the same thing. They may not have made that team that they wanted to make, but because they did make that team, the other team was open. And that happens at my son's school. They have tryouts for basketball.